it was tough for a short while, and then you move on. And I was lucky. I mean, I've never been precious about the business in that sense, so I didn't feel like it was my life's work destroyed. And it wasn't that. It was more about what a feckin' idiot I am to have let this happen, and actually how are we going to pay the mortgage next month.
The Architects of Business, with EY Entrepreneur of the Year, telling the inspirational stories behind Ireland's most successful entrepreneurs.
Hello and welcome to the Architects of Business, made in partnership with EY Entrepreneur of the Year, where you will hear the inspirational stories of some of Ireland's most successful entrepreneurs. I'm Sonya Lennon, broadcasting remotely at this time. And on this week's show, I catch up with the founder of Camile Thai, Brody Sweeney, a serial entrepreneur who built and lost one restaurant empire only to grow another. If you haven't already done so, click subscribe to get brand new shows directly into your feed. Brody Sweeney, thank you so much for joining me on Architects of Business today. I feel like I'm so ready for this interview. You have a sort of mythical property in Irish business as, I suppose, one of life's serious rebounders. Your story is amazing. But let's begin at the beginning, as we always do on this show. Just a little bit of socio-psychological context for where this drive came from. Tell us a little bit about Brody growing up.
Well, I wish I could say I was a rag to riches story. I'm not. I grew up in South Dublin. My dad was a lawyer and my mum was a stay-at-home mum. And we were a big family, 7 kids. A really good upbringing as far as my memory goes. Really interesting. My kids, interestingly, my brothers and sisters, interestingly, all ended up kind of not working for somebody else. They're all either self-employed or doing their own thing, and I always thought that was a kind of funny thing. We all obviously went to school. 5 of us went on to second level. Nobody finished, so it's kind of interesting. Apart from my brother who did an apprenticeship as a fitter turner, he qualified, but the rest of us who went to college didn't actually make it through. So I don't know what that says about our upbringing.
What do you think that came from? That must have come from something.
My dad was a very entrepreneurial guy. He was always getting involved in starting businesses apart from his legal practice. So I think we all loved starting new things. We got a bit distracted if things went on too long, and that maybe fed through to us. I started my first proper business with my dad. He bought a master franchise for a print shop chain from the UK called Prontoprint. Some of the older viewers might remember that. And but he hadn't thought through who was going to run it. So I was in college at the time doing business in what was then the brand new DCU. So I more or less begged him to come out of college to get that business started. And he, as any parent would, was very reluctant, but eventually caved in and got me started. And I actually feel I got my University of Life education from that business, which I ran for 8 years. And I really got a good grounding in kind of how to run a business, but more particularly how not to. Which has stood me in good stead.
Can I just ask you, was there a precursor to that in your entrepreneurial story? Did you, like all great entrepreneurs, start as a child before that?
Well, I mean, others might say I wasn't a great entrepreneur, really, but I did. Actually, I did. Yeah, I mean, I started a first kind of proper business at kind of 15 during the summer holidays. Cutting down trees in Killiney, where we were brought up. We had a chainsaw, I remember, and a friend of mine printed up business cards, and off we went. And to our shock and horror, we got a big job, which we did that summer. It didn't end well. We managed to knock a tree down across the Vico Road, which the fire brigade had to come and chop up, and then there were questions asked about insurance and that kind of thing. And so I had a business each summer really during school. So I've never had a job, never had a proper job, and so I've always done my own thing. Arguably completely unemployable now, and indeed, when my OBriens business went into examinership, that was one of the dawnings on me at the time, was that I actually was unemployable at that age because I never worked for anybody else.
But we'll come to that in a little minute. I'd love to hear from you after your 8 years in Pronto Print. What were the takeaways? You said you'd learned how not to run a business. What did you bring with you?
Yeah, I think franchising, which I've been in all my career, is a really great way for a young person to start in business, because it touches on all the business disciplines. So when we think of business, we think of under 4 headings: so finance, marketing, operations, and HR. That pretty much encapsulates most businesses, which are incredibly complex, but they all kind of come under those 4 headings. So I learned that, and I learned how to build a brand up from scratch, and I learned about dealing with people, because in franchising, it's really primarily about relationships, and in a sense, it doesn't matter what your legal agreements say if the relationships aren't great. So I learned about that, and the business. That business I had for 8 years never really made any money, but I was kind of learning as I went along, and so by the time I got onto my second business, which was OBriens, I was able to take those 8 years of learnings and do a better job of it.
So tell us about the moment that the second business began.
So it's I was operating obviously Pronto Print. My dad died. This is around 1988, and I decided to shift on and do something else. So at the time, older viewers again might remember the sandwich market in Dublin was very simple. Sandwiches came in 3 flavors. They were wrapped in cling film, sat on top of a newsagent's counter, and they came in ham or cheese, or you could get ham and cheese together, and that was kind of what sandwiches were like. Exotic, yeah. So a friend of mine had set up a sandwich bar down on Merrion Row, really gorgeous sandwich bar, but he wasn't great at the business side of it, and that really inspired me to set the business up. And at the very beginning, we were making sandwiches to order, which was completely new in Ireland at the time, and then to kind of get a USP on them, I had gone to Johnson Mooney, who were our bread suppliers at the time, and got them for the bread they were baking for us to take every second toot out of the saw that they were cutting up the sliced pans with, and so we ended up with a double thick slice, and that was kind of quite different. It was obviously a big meal in itself, but it gave us a kind of a talking point in terms of getting the brand going. We started in Georgia Street in Dublin in 1988, very troubled start at that too, but eventually it went through, and it became a great business over 20 years.
Tell us, what was the troubled start?
Well, it was just George Street actually wasn't a great location. It was kind of pre-Temple Bar, so it wasn't the best location in the world to start. So the sales weren't that brilliant. We opened a second restaurant, a second sandwich bar in what was then the brand new St. Stephen's Green Shopping Centre. Tiny unit, 203 square feet. It's indelibly seared on my brain, the size of that, because I remember the health authorities coming in to view us as a kind of restaurant and saying, well, where are you going to put the toilets? And I remember with 203 square feet, that would be kind of the toilets. There wouldn't really be much left for a shop. But that was a flyer. It just took off like a rocket, that one. And so that gave great comfort, but also a bit of cash flow. So we went on to open more, make kind of more mistakes. George Street really wasn't a great location at the time. It would be great now. I made every mistake going. Sometimes I was smart enough not to repeat the mistakes, but I have to make it first. Yeah.
So at its height then, what was the pinnacle of the OBriens empire?
Well, around, I'm just trying to get my mind back, around 2005, we had 340 OBriens restaurants in 16 countries around the world. We were turning over about 140 million. It was great fun. I absolutely loved it. We had quite a chain, as we still do, as OBriens still do in Asia. We had an office for the region in Singapore, and it was great fun. It was really gratifying to see in airports like Changi in Singapore or in Beijing, OBriens outlets, this positive representation of Ireland that wasn't alcoholic, and so people, got to see it, and it made me very proud, when people come home and say, "My God, I was passing through, Kuala Lumpur and came across an OBriens, extraordinary." So it was really great, and the business went really well. I kind of semi-retired from the business around 2000, at the end of 2005. The business was going well then, and to do some of the things I enjoyed. So I wrote a couple of books. I stood for election for Fine Gael. I started a charity working in Ethiopia. All great, fantastic things to do. But around 2008, the business, which I still owned, started to feel the effects of the downturn. And so I had to come back into the business at that point and try and sort it out. And it became clear, around 2009, it wasn't going to be able to be sorted out as it was. We had a model where we had taken all the property leases into our company and sublet them out to our franchisees. And that was not a great model in 2008 to have. And so the business went into examinership in 2009. The examinership didn't work at the time. We were trying to get rid of our most problematic leases. It was found to be unconstitutional at the time. It was a bit of a bummer because 2 weeks later, another retailer went in and it was found to be perfectly constitutional, but it was too late for us. So the business then was put into, when the examinership failed, the business was put into receivership. It was taken over by the Abracadabra guys, which upset me. That was really the most upsetting part of the whole bit of going out of business, because I'd kind of spent 20 years dissing Abracadabra, and then they ended up taking over the business. So I was a little bit upset about that. So that was 2009, and I ended up with the business gone from me. I mean, the business OBriens has survived fine. It's great to see, but not my part of it. And so I found myself out of work, out of my kind of notional wealth gone, and having to start all over again, like a lot of people at the time. And that was tough for a relatively short period, but I'm an optimist by nature. So I dusted myself down and got going again with.
I'm interested, you say that you practically took 3 months to feel sorry for yourself, to wallow in it. And it must have been such a tough time. I mean, you tell the story stoically, but it's a huge investment in your life that sort of you're ousted from. That period, I think, even optimists need time to lick their wounds. What was that like for you, and what did you come away with?
Look, I'm not different than anybody else who went through a bad time at business. It's actually, I always think it's kind of like, it's funny, people always want to talk about this part of my life or other people's lives. And for me, it's a bit like a divorce, it happened 10 years ago. It was pretty messy at the time, but I don't really like to talk about it because it's,
Move on.
That part of my life is over. But, lots of people have to do it. Lots of people were like me, which was, you're like a cornered rat in a sense that, it's not an option to sit in bed. There's a mortgage, there's a big Celtic Tiger mortgage to be paid, and the kids to be put through school. So it's not an option. I was blessed to have a missus, my wife Lulu, who was just a rock at the time, and actually had a bit of income coming in, which made a big difference. But it is just something that I think it happens, and I think my sister lost a child a few years ago. That's much tougher than what I went through. People go through messy divorces. It's tougher. I'm blessed by having an optimistic nature. So it was tough for a short while, and then you move on. And I was lucky. I mean, I've never been precious about the business in that sense. So I didn't feel like it was my life's work destroyed. And it wasn't that. It was more about what a feckin' idiot I am to have let this happen, and actually how are we going to pay the mortgage next month.
So I suppose, the good thing about failure, and it's pretty much inevitable if you're going to go into business, is that you build those resources, you build that experience, you build that knowledge, and you get takeout and you move on. So I suppose after your period of reflection, what was the next step?
So I knew a little bit about franchising, a little bit about food. I had an idea around around takeaway foods, I'd always noticed that that the two of the three biggest sectors, which are fish and chips and Chinese, have no brands in them, and I was always intrigued with that. I mean, people look at Chinese restaurants even still, and you look at them and you go, that's a business that's so ripe for modernization. So, and I'm generalizing because there's some very good ones, but generally speaking, they're poorly designed. There's no customer service. There's no nice packaging. The menus are too long. So no branding. So all those things that they don't do, I thought I could bring to a new business, which I did, and set that up in 2010. A modern version of a Chinese takeaway. It turned into be an utter failure itself. And so I pivoted quickly from Chinese to Thai food. Interestingly, I think there's a great business case study because when I changed from Chinese to Thai food, I put the prices up by 40%. And when we changed over, it took off like a rocket, and it eventually became Camile, and became the foundation of a business now, which is coming up towards 40 restaurants. We've got a good position in London. We're way in ahead, kind of brand leaders in Ireland, and it's a good business. Fantastic young management team. I'm so proud of them, and they're all like less than half my age. I feel like a grandfather with them. There's such a gap, but an amazing team. Doing incredible work, really ambitious, really hungry to move the business along now. And we seem to have found a really nice niche for ourselves in a sense of being a technology-led restaurant business. So we're doing huge business. More than half our sales through our own proprietary app we've developed, which is wonderful. We're into robotics now in our kitchens. We're the launch partner for Manna with their drones. And we've a huge pipeline, pandemic.
I'm going to come to that because all of that is fascinating and that needs a little bit more discussion. But I'd love to start with the birth of a brand. So, again, to say you're a businessman who brings so much experience to the table at this stage. How did you begin to position Camile, to create Camile, and to create a brand which is so well known now?
Yeah, it's great to say it's so well known, because actually it's fairly well known in Dublin and it's not that well known anywhere else. So the name we came up with through SurveyMonkey. I had a different name for it. It wasn't my choice, but this was like a name put in just to kind of make up the numbers. And so when it was a clear majority in favour of Camile, and when we figured that out. I realised Camille is a French name for a boy or a girl, and it's spelled with two L's. I figured out if you took one L out of it, we'd be able to make that into a trademark, which we did. And then in my late middle age now, male way, we imagined who Camille was. So Camille, in our mind, we invented this character. So Camille was 25. She was half Asian. She was half European. She was gorgeous. She was tall. She was beautiful. Great crack. Loved her food. Was into kind of sustainability in a bit of a way. So we imagined this character we called Camille, and then we designed a business and a brand that would reflect her personality in, I'd say, my late middle-aged male way. And so we looked at, what would Camille like to eat? Having this firm picture in our minds. So we knew she'd probably like to see the calories, but she'd ignore them then. And she'd like some vegan because she'd be into that kind of thing, and she'd be into sustainability. And she'd like packaging that looked pretty on her table, that didn't look like shit. So that so we thought about the restaurants. What sort of restaurant would you like to come into? So we're in fast casual space, so people aren't going for their anniversary dinner. So can we get in and out quickly? Can we take the guilt away that often you associate with takeaway? And the big change that's happened in our lifetime, Sonya, is that when I was 18 or 25, a takeaway was once a month on the way home from the pub, and you didn't feel terrible about it because it wasn't very often. 25-year-olds now living in cities are having takeaways, in inverted commas, 3 or 4 times a week, not once a month. And they're doing that because they are spending way too much time on their screens. So there's less home time. They just have busier lives. And so takeaways when I was 25 were, not very good, not very high quality, tacky shop fronts, all the things you associate with bad takeaways, antisocial behavior, litter on the streets, all that kind of stuff. The modern version of that doesn't have that. So we realized as people were eating this food 3 or 4 times a week in London or Dublin, that we could give them some healthier options. And so if you're living in Rathmines, for example, now you have on a platform like Deliveroo, you have 200 50 restaurants who'll deliver to you within half an hour, from the truly awful to the really good. So you can, if you want to eat vegan, you can. If you want to eat macrobiotic, you can. If you want to, all those choices are available to you now. And we just slotted in. We knew that reputation for the takeaway sector was that kind of guilty one. And we said, well, let's flip all that on its head. So with our packaging, let's not make crappy packaging. Let's make compostable packaging. Let's put decent ingredients in. So if it's a beef dish, it's Irish sirloin steak, it's fresh vegetables, it's sauces we made ourselves with no funny stuff in them. Let's educate people about what's in them so they can make choices. So let's show them what the calories are. So you can decide what you want to do. One of our big successes in the last couple of years has been putting on free yoga classes in the city parks. So we had 8,000 people came through last year. Free yoga classes in Merrion Square and St. Anne's and Bushy Park. So
it's really interesting because I think that the consumer is entering sort of a golden age of respect from everybody who serves them, it's something that I believe in my business as well. It's where can you add additional value, and that's very much along those lines. But I think that's all wonderful, and that's all part of the brand build. It must be incredible to think that you were already at the start of an S curve when all this was being built, and then the biggest S curve of them all, COVID hit, and you were primed for a brand new phase of the business.
Yeah, and it's extraordinary the way it happens, because I have a lot of friends and associates who are in hospitality and are having a miserable time. It's just, my heart goes out to them, and just by luck, and it's just by accident we decided to set up a business that focused on home delivery. So we are located primarily in suburbs where people are living. We have hardly anything in city centres or shopping centres. And before the pandemic hit, we were over 70% of our business was off premises, so mostly home delivered. So
Brody, can I ask you, was the out of shopping centre and out of city strategic, financial?
Totally. No, totally strategic. I mean, an inspiration for our business is Domino's Pizza. And so at the very start, we just looked at where they were going, and we noticed that they weren't going into city centres or shopping centres. So our business is serving people a hot evening meal at home. That's our primary business. So we put them in the middle of chimney pots, basically in the middle of a bunch of chimney pots. So our whole strategy was actually to stay away from the centre. So if we think of London, we never had any interest in going into the city or the West End. We're out in the kind of outer suburbs, and that's absolutely was the right strategy for us, but it's proven the right strategy in the pandemic. People spending a lot more time at home, and they're living in the suburbs. The centres, Canary Wharf, the West End of London, they're empty. I was there last week. I'm self-isolating since I came back, but I had a meeting on New Bond Street, which is just off Oxford Street, and New Bond Street's boarded up. It's incredibly sad. And going through Gatwick Airport with the south terminal is closed entirely, and the north terminal is like it's just like a mausoleum. It's incredible the impact on these traditional industries that's come out of this, and we have just by accident been in a space that's been the right space to be. And in fact, I'd argue that if you were designing a food business for the pandemic, you'd design Camile. This is perfect. So we held our own during the lockdown, and we've had a substantial rise since then. In London, we have 6 restaurants, and we're well ahead of what we were doing last year. I mean, it's gone from kind of coming along nicely to actually it's working fine now.
So what percentage of growth are you seeing in your business now over this period?
So we're in London, we're tracking about 40% ahead of last year on like-for-likes, and in Ireland over 20%. So extraordinary. And that's way more than we would have expected in a normal year.
So Brody, you said yourself, you're a long game man, you're a strategic man, you are a process man. And so this sort of fascination with new technology is at the core of your strategy, I can only assume.
Yeah, it is. Technology is a huge enabler for business like ours. So, for example, like most of our customers are spending their lives on screens, and so they're choosing to a large extent to interact with the world through their screens. So we got that from the very beginning, 10 years ago, that we needed to have a good app. We needed to be able to sell online really easily. So we took that on board. It wasn't a kind of a late thing for us. We built it right into it. Food businesses around the world are one of the last bastions of high labour businesses that haven't had any real automation. So in nearly every restaurant business, it's entirely manual, the process. So we got thinking about our business in particular, which is, cooking, preparing food, cooking it on a wok, packing it and dispatching it. And could we reduce the amount of labour on the cook line and redeploy those staff into something else? One of the interesting things people always ask with robotics, what about the jobs? And if you look at America or Britain pre the pandemic, there's a lot of automation and very low unemployment. So people get redeployed into other areas of business, which is great. So we can see we can take labour out, and we have to, because one of the things that didn't exist when we started were these aggregators like Deliveroo and Just Eat. A lot of people choose to interact with restaurants through those. We hate them. Because they charge crazy commissions and it's very hard to make money. But if they are a reality, and we have to accept that they are for a lot of people, then we need to find other ways to save money. So robotics being one of those. And a third one is drones. So we're working with Bobby Healy's company, Manna. Drones are just, first of all, they're very real and they're going to be with us very soon. But they're extraordinary in the sense of, firstly, making it cheaper for us. So it's going to be, we think, about half the price of doing a delivery with a conventional driver. And again, they can be redeployed somewhere else. It's going to be quicker for you as a consumer. So if you're ordering from us and you want to get delivery, it'll go straight to your house at 80 kilometers an hour in 95% of weather conditions, and there's no traffic, there's no roadworks. It just goes there straight, so quicker for you. And finally, it's environmentally friendly. So instead of sending a 3-ton car, we're sending a battery-powered drone, which is taking traffic off the roads. It's got virtually no carbon footprint. So it's all those things you just go, why would you not love that?
So talk me through the experience. I've ordered my delicious Camile meal and it's droning its way to me. What happens?
Well, so when you make your order first, through our app, we'll send you back a Google Earth image of your house and with a grid overlaid in it, and you'll pick a square you want the food dropped into. So it might be in your front driveway or your outside your rear door. So we cook the food, load it into the drone, which will live in a 20-foot shipping container at the front or the back of a restaurant. 20-foot shipping container is a little bit bigger than a car parking space, but it's that kind of size. So we load it into the drone, takes off to 400 feet, flies directly to your house. When it gets to your house, it hovers over the square, sends you a text message asking you, are you ready to receive it? You say yes. The drone comes down to 40 feet, and a little door opens underneath it, and the food comes down on a string, which is biodegradable, very important. And the string then unravels from the drone and just falls down on top of the food, and the drone goes back up to 400 feet and flies back to base.
So you have been part of the EY alumni throughout this whole process. It must be a great support to you to know that all the other pirates in this ship have been through the same ups and downs.
Yeah, it's great. It's a long time since I did it. Since I was involved in it, it's probably 20 years ago. I wasn't here at the time, and I don't think it was as big a fuss. There certainly wasn't any kind of fancy foreign trips or anything like that. I think I was in Singapore at the time, and I got the news that we'd been beaten by a guy with a horse blanket, and I remember being kind of really guy with a horse blanket, which was a great business actually. I think it's called Horseware. More recently, my wife Lulu, she was a finalist last year, so it's kind of rekindled my interest. She goes to everything, does everything, absolutely loves it. It's a brilliant support. I'm less engaged, but I know it's great to have that kind of network of people behind you. And there is something about this kind of exclusive club where we've all been through the process of setting up a business. Anybody who's made it to finals had a lot of highs and lows in their career, and so there's a comfort, but also a practical knowledge there of being able to talk to people who've been through the same thing. Running a business is very lonely, I always think, in the sense of you know, when you're running your own thing, it's you know, you often have challenges or problems you don't really know how to deal with, and so you think you're the only one who's having that problem, and so having that network of people you can call on just to bounce things off in a non-judgmental way is great.
So is the business that you've created now, do you feel it lives in a genre of its own as a low-cost franchise?
Well, we have a low-cost franchise option, but actually, you know, the mainstream franchise is not cheap. So you're talking about an investment of 400,000 to set up a standard Camile. We developed a new idea during the pandemic as a response to the fact we knew a lot of restaurants and hotels were in trouble. And so we said, you know, could we go into your existing kitchen and convert it to a Camile, and so you could set up a delivery and collection service without the investment typically we would make in the front of house, or, you know, typically we go into a building and build it from scratch. So you got to put in the toilets and the electrics and the ceiling and the plumbing. And so in an existing restaurant or an existing pub or bar or hotel, they've already made that investment. So we had the idea of changing that around so that we could, for a very low cost, get them into the Camile business. And the ones we've done have been really successful. It's a real pain point, obviously, for a lot of businesses in hospitality at the moment. So the footfall is gone from outside their premises. Government restrictions say they can't operate, you know, bring people onto the premises. So we say, well, look, you don't have to rely on people going onto premises. We can do home delivery and take out as well. So it's been a real lifeline for some of the business we've been involved with already. But we do think we're in a different genre. So, you know, takeaways, you know, fast food have been around for years. We think we're more like a restaurant that delivers. It's that standard of food, and that's kind of a new space. So typically, restaurant businesses are, you know, Domino's is fast food, McDonald's is fast food. Big chains tend to, in our space, have that kind of lowest common denominator feel. We think we're doing a more of a restaurant quality. It's better for you. It's less processed food, and so I think that's a new space, and we're really excited about it because we can't see a Camile type of business not only in Britain, but we can't see one in the States either, or in Asia. So the opportunity is incredible for us and for our young management team. To really take this and bring it on. And it's kind of crazy because you look in London, you know, it's a Thai food business owned by Irish people, run primarily by Indians in London. Like it's nuts.
Brody, you started this business thinking big, and I have no doubt that it is going to get bigger and bigger and bigger. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you today, and I wish you the best of luck.
Thank you, Sonya.
Thanks for listening and watching Architects of Business, made in partnership with EY Entrepreneur of the Year. Thanks to the whole team here at JOE, and of course to our entrepreneur today, Brody Sweeney. If you haven't already done so, click subscribe and never miss a show.